As you know, we have a slogan here at the Geek Bus. First, you've got to get a grip, and then you have to loosen it. Get a grip means you got to hold on. You got to hold on to something. That's what getting a grip is. I suppose when you say get a grip in the literal concrete sense, you mean establish the proper grip on whatever it is, whatever tool you're going to be using, or to whatever you're going to hang on to. We have to hang on to things in order to survive. When you're an infant, you can't afford to let go and be left behind or left without care. And so that's kind of getting a grip and holding on. But also later in life, whenever you're trying to do anything, you got to get hold of it. But of course, that isn't what we mean when we say get a grip. We're saying get a grip on yourself. Pull yourself together, I think, is when we say get a grip, we're really saying, get hold of yourself and establish some form of equilibrium so that you can continue to engage in a civilized fashion with your fellow human beings. Most of us have had the experience of getting too tight a grip in a literal sense when we're trying to learn something. How to golf swing is a good example, but lots of other activities. When you hold on too tightly, you tend to reduce your ability to accomplish what the grip is meant to accomplish. Needless to say, well, I think it's needless to say, this is true in human relationships too. If you hold on to another person too tightly psychologically, you're going to restrict their movement. In any case, get a grip and then loosen it means that if you really want to gain maximal control over whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, that's the way physically to do it, and it's also the way psychologically to do it. It's an extension, an abstraction of the physical to the mental. You could say that all of biology and evolution involve internalization. You're a single cell floating around in the primordial soup. You start taking in elements that allow you to do some processing of information internally rather than externally. So rather than wait around to be gobbled up by something else, you develop a flagellum and you can swim away rather than having to wait to run into some nutrients. You can go looking for them and ingest them and digest them later and things like that. So as life becomes more complex, more and more functions are internalized within the cell and then within groups of cells, etc. But this, I think, could be viewed as going on continuously, not just in your more complex organisms. This happens physically, but it also happens psychologically. That is, the mind takes in ideas and experiences, converts them to memories that can be pulled back up and consulted, and slowly, situations and ways of thinking that were once outside are now inside. And there's a way in which we lay down causal maps, among other things, that for a while they become a transient part of us, but over a very long period of time, they become actual physical components of our nervous system. So somewhere in between, much of what it is to be human resides in our minds and brains. So the idea of establishing a grip and then loosening it pertains to that. As I've said before about complex systems, it's very difficult to know. There's an old joke about politicians, I can't remember exactly how it goes, about looking for problems in the wrong places, misidentifying them, coming up with inadequate solution to what is the wrong problem to begin with, etc. And that kind of joke is funny because we know what happens when somebody from the outside comes into a complicated situation, a complex situation, to put it that way, and thinks they can solve it with a simple-minded answer. It never goes well. And as I've said before, the idea that maybe deciding what not to do is more advantageous in a complex system than deciding what to do. It's counterintuitive in a way because people think to decide what not to do is the same thing as not doing anything. This is very much untrue. I remember many instances in medical training where a person comes into the emergency room and they've been over drinking and their glucose is a little bit high. And somebody wants to give them insulin because they can't tolerate the idea that somebody's glucose is a little high. They want to get those numbers right where they like them. They'd like all the numbers to be normal. The problem is when you've been drinking, you've used up all your reducing equivalents, and you're in danger of becoming hypoglycemic anyway. So giving the person a chance to sober up and get a meal into them and see how they do is the way to stay out of trouble when you've got somebody, say, in an emergency room for detoxification. But if you give in to some other people's interest in getting those numbers right, you're going to end up with a patient now in a hypoglycemic crisis and requiring volume replacement and glucose and in dire straits. You could have avoided it by thoughtful waiting to see how things evolve. But when you suggest doing that, others tend to say, oh, you want to do nothing about the person's hyperglycemia. And the answer is that no, it's not that I want to do nothing. I want to do something. And that something is waiting to see what direction things are going in, so that when I do make a correction of some kind, it's going to be a safe one without unintended consequences. Things are complicated. But the thing is, the physical business of getting a grip or failing to get a grip and the tendency with something difficult to grip too tightly, that's a danger.